All right, everybody. I am Ed Cruz. Welcome. This is the last lesson. This is episode 59. This is called Balance is Perfect. So I have, as I talked about in previous videos, we have the physical, we have the mental, and we have the spiritual. And then we kind of break it down into as how those three encompass your way of life in general. So I like it if we were to break it down. First, we look at physically. We look at the punch, right? Active and passive, right? The active hand punching out, the passive hand pulling back. That's the physical mentality of the punch. We then look at the mental stage, and we understand then that one doesn't exist without the other, and vice versa. That means a good action has bad within it. A bad action has good within it, and one cannot exist with the other. Front hand is true. You see this side, but you don't see this side. All right? And that's the mental aspect of that. And then if we look at the overall topic that I'm trying to say is everything is perfectly balanced. It really is. And it comes to the point where the freedom, the free will that we have that exists is based off choices that we make. Like, for example, in this very moment, people are making choices. I choose to eat, I choose to exercise, I choose to sleep, I choose to do this, I choose to do that. And from those choices, of the billions of people, what is this, 7-8 billion people circumferencing the world, each one, even from the global distance of another, affects each other, one another. Not directly, but in some form or some fashion, there is some relationship as far as everything occurring within the entire world or energy of the universe. So when we look at perfectly balanced, it means that the choices we make eventually come back to us in some form or manner. So I liken it to the fact that a lot of people go like, oh man, that guy's so lucky. He's lucky. Honestly, I don't believe in luck. I believe that choices were made, and then as a result of that, a balance has occurred, and that balance resulted into the current events that may be happening to you at that particular time. Because I want to stress that concept and idea, because all too often I think people look at things, and let me give you an example that I see often right away, is politically or whatever, there's some kind of social injustice, that something, I can't believe they get away with it. So for example, something happens, and then the constant response that I hear from different segments or response for one or another is like, oh, I can't believe it. How come someone can get away with it? I can't get away with it. Trying to justify a wrong with another wrong is not technically right? And the problem is basically, what's some of the crap that we hear? Political issues or whatever, or whatever. I'm trying to think of something. For example, the inequality of men and women, right? The equality of men and women, right? We have that argument all the time. It's like, oh well, let's give a simple example, right? I think there's a lot of bitching and complaining, like, oh, the WNBA players, they're not getting paid as much as the NBA players. Well, guess what? They fucking suck. Should I say that? I mean, okay, if a WNBA player challenges me to basketball, yeah, she's gonna beat me in basketball. That's not the question about that. That's not my game. And she could probably shoot and do everything. And they're like, oh, well, you know, men and women are equal. Men and women are not freaking equal, okay? They're equal. If you look at the equality, and I say perfect balance, they're equal in their own way. But there's varying differences that physically or mentally, there's something that occurs between the two that eventually equals them out. But if you say physically men and women are equal, that's not the case, right? You may say, well, that Olympic athlete female cannot run that fat dude. Yeah, that's the case. But you take that same Olympic athlete female versus the same Olympic athlete male, and she'll totally be smoked. So, for example, the WNBA, we're talking about, oh, well, they're not getting paid as well. Well, they're not as good, right? If you watch a NBA game, compared to like a regular basketball game. You got 1 hour of layups, right? And that level of basketball is not even comparable to like college basketball for men's. So people are arguing, oh, it's not fair, they're not getting paid. Well, if you say, I'm basing it on the fact that that equality exists, because should the men get paid more? If they draw more, they should get paid more. All right. If the women draw more, then they should get paid more. Then that's the case. But you can see the difference between the two. Another example I'll give you is in tennis, right? Tennis, it finally came to the point where men and women make the same amount of money. And it's like, oh, we finally found equality. I don't know what the ratings are for women tennis, but I'll tell you this, which isn't unfair, that if men and women make the same amount of money playing tennis, they don't play the same amount of matches. In other words, in the regular final of like say Wimbledon, French Open and stuff like that, women play three sets, men play 5 sets, but they still get paid the same amount. Does that seem fair? And in some ways it doesn't, but yet, but people will be bitching about it. It's like, oh, it is fair. It's like, okay, you can't have one way and not the other. So now these are, I'm just thinking out of the blue as far as things that come into mind that people are bitching and challenging about. And at the end of the day, I don't worry about that, because the reality is, at this particular time, at this particular moment, the way things have happened, the way things have occurred, has occurred because of choices that have been made from one point to another. And in reality, it is how it should be at that particular time. And I know in this is Wing Chun philosophy, and it's difficult for it to grasp. I remember from saying, from talking to Sifu when I first started diving into this, that he was explaining it to me, and I couldn't grasp the concept of, oh, how is this fair, or how is that not fair? But eventually, I opened up to the idea and tried to, instead of judging it right away, I eventually started listening to what he was saying, and then I was able to understand his point of view and his. And why is it so vital is because when people have that misconception, all right, oh, someone's always getting away with it, someone's always doing it. There's a balance between that, because, like I said, everything ties into it one another. If you live by the fact of the first rule I talk about, that you're responsible for yourself, then guess what? That mind frame or that way of thinking plays a huge effect on how everything else that you do. If you have that idea that I'm responsible for myself, you end up being, between the choices between being a bitcher or a doer, more than likely you're going to be a doer. And if you don't have that, more than likely you'll be a bitcher. And when you're a bitcher, guess what? More than likely, the way you look at things is everything is unfair or unchangeable. And because, oh, it's so unfair, it's unbalanced. But if you're on the other hand, where you take that responsibility and you become a doer, then you realize that you can create that balance for yourself. Okay, so I know this is a deep subject, and I kind of got sidetracked off this because the organization, I don't have that full organization of how I want to display it to you, but let's just talk about this as a preview as far as how things are balanced and how I see things as balanced in it. I'm not asking people, like I said, with anything, when I think Wing Chun is great, it's great. I'm not asking people to believe that, nor am I asking people to believe that the world is perfectly balanced. This is how I see it, and frankly, I'm not the one miserable. All right, so we'll dive into this subject a little more, and if you have questions, definitely ask. I kind of sometimes forget to say that when I make these videos, but we'll dive into this deeper when I can get it fully organized, so that, okay, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense, and you can, easier for you to grasp for now. Okay, so just remember, every action has a cost to it, and from that cost, a result comes from that, and then from that, it is balanced. It's not unfair. Maybe in this lifetime or the next time, something had to be paid or something had to be evened out. But right now, at this very moment, it is as it should be. All right.